why you keep misunderstanding people, and how to stop. This is the beginning of a new video series, Mended Light.
Everybody knows what it's like to be misunderstood and communicate, and then after the fact be like, ooh, the conversation that I thought we had was obviously not the conversation we had, and I have no idea what happened, right? And in a less mature perspective, you're like, well, it's the other person's fault. Mm-hmm. In a more mature perspective, you're like, maybe it was me, maybe it was them. I don't know. But we didn't understand each other.
Well, I've got a Chris Tucker Rush Hour version of the Who's on First conversation that illustrates this very type of thing. So let's dive in.
May I help you?
We'll be asking the questions, old man. Who are you?
You.
No, not me, you.
Yes, I am you.
Just answer the damn questions. Who are you?
I have told you.
Are you deaf?
No, you is blind.
I'm not blind, you blind.
That is what I just said.
You just said what?
I did not say what. I said you.
That's what I'm asking you.
And you is answering.
Shut up. You.
Yes?
Not you, him. What's your name?
Me.
Yes, you.
I am me.
He's me. And I'm you.
And I'm about to whoop your old ass, man, because I'm sick of playing games. You, me, everybody's ass around here. Him, I'm going to kick his ass. I'm sick of this.
That was real good.
Yeah. So in this case, the misunderstanding and miscommunication comes from cultural differences and semantics.
Right.
Which are two valid reasons that we misunderstand each other, miscommunicate. But it goes so much deeper than that. Where are you at, and the person you're interacting with, where are you both at in your development, in your understanding of yourself, in your understanding of others? And how do we bridge those gaps so that we can grow together and not hurt each other unintentionally? If we hurt each other, it should only be intentional. You have put together, I'm really excited about this, our beloved Alicia, with her mad research skills, has put together a human developmental theory, bringing together the works of people like Jean Piaget, whose specialty was cognitive development, James Fowler, who specialized in spiritual and existential development, and Susan Cook-Grutter, whose specialty was vertical adult development. Now, that's not just growing taller, that's moving upwards in your development psychologically.
Doesn't that sound exciting? Aren't we excited?
So I love mashups, and this is a psychology mashup where you've taken the research of these three and created something new with it. So talk us through it, and how is it going to help us with misunderstandings?
So here's the thing. We talk about physical development, but we don't often talk about psychological development.
Sure.
I talked to multiple people about it, both with a therapeutic and psychological background, and then nerdy people like me who just like to read books. Nobody had ever heard of these concepts brought together the way that I was researching them and finding them, and so I got really excited. And then one of the questions I asked you, I'm like, is this actually exciting, or am I just excited about it? So it's
actually exciting. That was my answer. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing the series.
So here's the thing. In one stage of adult development, we tend to be more identified with tradition and collectively held values. In another stage, we become more interested in clarifying our personal values, sometimes at the expense of group belonging. And still, at other stages, we have heightened awareness of marginalized voices and those we tend to exclude. And here's the thing. In each stage of development, we fall into the human trap of thinking ours is the right one.
Right.
And that's where we disconnect, right? And instead of there being strength from diversity of experiences and diversity of perspectives, we marginalize, we exclude, we judge, and that is taking away from the strength of the whole. And so if we have an understanding of these concepts of psychological development, paired with our understanding of personality types and what we tend to tie our value to, I feel like, honestly, it would address 90% of miscommunication and conflict.
Well, and my background is couples and family therapy, so it's all about relationships and communication. And as I've been, in preparation for this, I was reading through your outlines and reading through what you had put together, and I'm like, this really does address the simple fact that we all come at life from different angles.
Yeah.
We all have different values, and we're all trying...
For real reasons.
For very real reasons,
Yeah.
from our backgrounds and experience. And we're all trying to balance self-actualization, duty to self, and our duty to others, the people in our immediate circles, and then our broader communities at large. And as we meet each other in that space, it can get really complex.
Right, and messy, and confusing, and vulnerable, and hurtful.
Yes.
Right?
And so what I love about this is we're going to disentangle it and make it simple. Well, and I feel like by and large, everyone is doing their best, like the best that they know how to do right by themselves, but to do right by others. You have some outliers with extreme narcissism or sociopathy where people don't really care about anyone but themselves. They're not necessarily doing their best by other people, but most of us are trying to make
the vast majority.
Yeah, to do right by others. And so I think our starting point is extending grace of this person in front of me, they're doing the best they know how. So let's see if we can help them and me to know more and to understand more and to meet in the middle more.
So as I was learning about these stages, I realized how easily one worldview and set of values collide with another, and how one stage does not recognize or respect the strengths or values of another stage. And that lack of recognition and respect leads to disconnection and conflict, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, there's an erroneous and not often cognitive or rational belief that every member of a certain community, whether it be family of origin, religion, or culture, should be alike. But there is strength in diversity. There is strength because there is wisdom, there's value, resilience, tenacity. All these important virtues come both from the diversity of experience, but also the diversity of personality, your passions, your skills. And we undermine that strength when we reject each other for our differences.
Instead, we can choose curiosity and compassion, seeking to learn from what is unfamiliar instead of feeling overwhelmed or threatened by it. That sounds simple and easy to implement. Here's why it's challenging. Because it is our tendency as humans to tie our worth and our identity to what we value.
Well, and we talk about this in our Personalities online video course, which you can take for free right now. Link is in the description. That whatever you value, you tend to tie your worth to. So for example, I'm a healer, right? Therapist. I love helping people. I love bringing them comfort, helping them make things better. The issue is if I tie my worth to that, what happens when I fail? What happens when I try and help somebody and they don't take the advice? Or I give them advice and it ends up not working well for their situation? Or they reject me and say, I don't want your help. I may feel like a loser and a failure, not because what I value is bad. Helping others is not a bad thing. But because I've tied my worth to, if I can't help this person, then I suck, right? And you can look at that whether you tie your worth to accomplishment and achievement, or to knowledge, or to being able to entertain, whatever it is. If we tie our worth to what we value, we put ourselves into position to see ourselves as less than and to fill ourselves with self-loathing. It is essential to love and accept and embrace ourselves and acknowledge our worth is innate.
So to me, that begs the question of, who am I if I'm not fill in the blank, right? With a role or an identity or a value. Who am I if I'm not that?
If I'm not funny, who am I if I'm not helping? Who am I if I'm not successful? Who am I if I'm not the smartest person in the room, right? Also, how can I show unconditional love to another person who lives their life drastically differently than my own if I unconsciously believe that my worth and belonging is tied to what I do and how I do it? I will therefore unconsciously believe that their worth, their belonging, their value is tied to what they do and how they do it. I am then unconsciously, in essence, saying to those who are different from me, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. I'm also passing on that judgment to myself, my children, my family, my friends, anytime they do not live up to my expectations. And that is a big reason why there is so much hurt, rejection, loneliness, and misunderstanding in the world. I have a relative, and this person has put in a lot of work to not be this way anymore. They're in a much healthier, supportive place. But in the past, they had a lot of anxiety and self-judgment about, is my life organized? Is my house clean? Am I presenting in the best way possible at all times?
We joke that this person was like Martha Stewart, but taken up like 5 notches. So beautiful person, beautiful home, beautiful presentation, everything that they did.
And genuinely cared about others.
Right.
But because they had tied their worth to, how do I look? How does my house look? How is everything in the right order? They pass that on to, well, if others are not arriving looking their best, or if their home isn't the most well kept, or their children not the best.
It was a
well
constant
behaved.
state of judgment about themselves that was then projected onto others.
And so not only were they stressed out almost all the time, so was anybody in their presence, because they were passing on that judgment. And so how did they get out of it? They got out of it by practicing unconditional self-love and positive regard. They still value having a clean house. They still value being well-dressed, but their worth isn't tied to it. and therefore they can extend unconditional love and acceptance to the other people in their lives. Well, and this reminds me of Piaget's central insight, which is that we don't actually see the world as it is, because the mind constructs meaning based on our cognitive development. Depending on where we're at, our stage of cognitive development, we come to different interpretations of who we are and how the world works.
That reminds me of the saying of we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are, right? But even having that awareness of, oh, my perspective is only a slice of the whole reality, that helps us in knowing that we have blind spots. And then person perspectives comes from Susan Cook Grutter and refers specifically to how many viewpoints or perspectives we can integrate into our meaning making. Stages can also be used, but the thing about stages is it emphasizes a linear path of growth. And in reality, growth and healing and learning and human development isn't linear. And the downfall of seeing it as linear is we unconsciously assume that certain stages are more important or less important than other stages.
Well, and so when you're talking about development as linear, some of you are like right there with us, and if we've lost some of you, here's what that essentially means. That you go from one stage of development to another throughout life, and they go in this sequential order for everybody across time.
Stages can also be used, but it emphasizes a linear path, and it perpetuates the illusion that somehow a later stage is better than an earlier one. And in reality, we need each stage.
They're all important.
Each stage is integral and critical to the development, and one stage isn't better than the next stage.
Right.
Like, to graduate high school, you need second grade.
Right. And who's going to say that senior year is more important than second grade? Like, they all got you to where you are. I like this quote by Thomas McConkie. He says, "Development is in fact omnidirectional. We grow up, we grow down, we grow all around. And the most foundational of our developmental qualities are each important seeds or stages in their own right." So growth and healing is a spiral, and we revisit principles that support us in that growth and healing journey again and again, learning and applying them at deeper levels. And I love that. If you've ever had the experience of reading a book, for example, if you have a book that you really love, or watching a movie for the first time that is really meaningful, and then you come back to it later in life and it's got a completely different... Hook is a great example of this. I watched Hook as a kid and I'm like, oh, it's about this old fuddy-duddy who needs to learn that work is boring and fun is awesome. And I watched it as an adult and I was bawling in the movie theater because they re-released it during COVID. I was bawling in the movie theater because it's actually about someone who wanted to be a parent and then lost their joy, the joy of parenting. They lost touch with that because of all the stress. And getting in touch with, no, this is my greatest joy. This is the meaning of everything. And building on that again. And Hook had two completely different meanings.
Well, and that's such a powerful point because both of those meanings are true, right? And then you might watch it again and then get another perspective, or you might discuss it with someone else who had a third or fourth perspective, and all those perspectives are true and valid. They're all an aspect of the whole. And if we can see ourselves this way, and we can see others this way, and if we can see our development this way, it's no longer about who's right or wrong or good or bad. It's all just about, we're on this journey, we're all learning and developing. How do I do it in a supportive way for myself? And how do I do it in a loving and supportive way for those that I care about?
Well, and to the point of this video, when it comes to miscommunications, sometimes we're approaching an experience, not only from a different frame of reference, but from different places in our growth journey. I have found, for example, my high school graduation and then my 10th year reunion, there were people who I couldn't stand, and I realized that was part my intolerance, but part just their approach and their perspective was so far removed from my own that I thought they were immature and petty. And then at the 20-year reunion, it felt like we all kind of locked into the same gear of, we've all seen some stuff, we've all been through some heartache, we've all been through some pain, and we're all wanting to learn from each other. And suddenly a lot of people at my 20th year reunion, they're people I never liked before. I'm like, oh, we could be friends now.
Well, and it wasn't a matter of jockeying for position or power or popularity, right? Which are all worth ties.
Yes.
And this is all unconscious. You didn't show up to your 20-year reunion and be like, well, I no longer identify as XYZ, so we can be friends.
A large part of it was me saying, I am now open to, I want to learn from the perspectives of others. And so a lot of miscommunications, this is the long form version of what we're going to teach you that you can do purposefully, which is I can choose to be open to where another person is coming from and where they're at in their development, and to see them and respect them, honor them, and embrace them as they are. And I can learn from them. And we clear up miscommunications when they're learning opportunities instead of we're trying to impose our will and our view on each other. Now, John and Julie Gottman, in their research on couples dynamics, found that in married couples, 69 to 70% of all problems are unsolvable. In other words, you can try and bang your heads, you can learn all the communication skills and perspective taking and all these things, and you're still not going to agree.
They're known as perpetual problems.
Right. But here's the thing, they're not truly problems. They're opportunities for growth in understanding and compassion and empathy for each other. We see them as problems because we're trying to get the other person to come to our side. We're trying to get them to see things the way we see them instead of opening ourselves up. And this isn't just true in couples relationships. I believe this is true in all relationships. There are a certain number of disagreements, a high percentage of disagreements that you're never going to resolve. You're never going to see eye to eye.
Well, they're just a matter of value differences and not moral values.
Right.
It's the value of, hey, I value getting the task done. You value connecting in the relationship. You're not willing to move forward with the task until you're confident the relationship is solid. And I'm like, the relationship's fine. Let's just get the job done. But when we tie our identity to those things, we feel like we're fighting for who we are, not about just a difference of opinions and perspectives.
And we don't need to go super deep into this here because we've done this in other video series, but that was a big part of the strain and the grinding of the gears between you and I for a long time. And part of arriving at the place we have now of love and respect and understanding is recognizing, oh, back to the clip, you are you and I am me.
You are you and I am me. Yep. And that's okay.
And that's okay. And like, instead of trying to solve that, we need to honor that. And that's brought us to this very healthy place.
And then the conversation to then have, because there are needs in there, is how do we meet each other's needs in a healthy way without expecting you to be responsible for my emotional state and vice versa.
Right.
So there's so many things we can align ourselves to, and we often do unconsciously. And I think the question to ask ourselves is, how do we fully embody and refine the gifts that are uniquely ours to cultivate? Or asked in a less academic way is, how do I lovingly become the best version of myself?
Which also empowers me to help others to do the same, give them space to do the same.
And how do I support the people I love, whether it be my children, my family members, my friends, in doing the same thing for themselves?
Well, in this video series, we're going to talk about person perspective, zero-person perspective, first-person perspective, second-person perspective. That's all going to sound like Greek to you right now, but that's the exciting part of this journey, is how do we grow from a place of kind of being self-centered to being others-centered and then balancing the two. And how does this help us with our misunderstandings? So we're going to give you a brief overview of what the next videos in the series are going to be about.
Well, and this roadmap is going to provide understanding for yourself. It's going to provide understanding in your interactions with others. And it's going to give you the ability to put down the judgment and pick up compassion. Because as we talk about these different stages and how necessary each stage is, and you're going to get to a certain point where the stages don't just happen. They're a choice. You're going to have to choose emotional maturity. You're going to have to choose learning about emotional intelligence. It gives us that understanding, and it gives us a construct that makes sense. And so we are then better able to apply that compassion and that grace and say, oh, here's what I'm going to choose.
So we're going to start with the zero-person perspective. In a zero-person perspective, we have not yet formed a view of self. This would be a baby in utero and a newborn child. This is a beginning we can always return to. It's full of possibilities. There's a transition from zero-person to first-person perspective during the first year of life.
So at first, when you talk about zero-person perspective, you're like, how can I have no perspective? And it's like, okay, well, a newborn baby does not cognitively know the difference between them and their mother.
Right.
Like they are one and the same.
Right. And they don't even understand what a person is. It's all just impulses and feelings at that point.
So first person perspective means we can only take one perspective, our own. This is the stage of I, me, mine. Anyone who has ever interacted with a toddler knows this stage. Let's pretend you're a small toddler. You're playing at the park. You see a toy. It's so bright and beautiful and shiny. You go, you take it. In your mind, you're not thinking, oh, I'm taking this toy from somebody else.
Right.
Because you're the only person that exists. You're saying, I want this toy, so therefore I am going to play with it.
You're aware on some level that other people exist, but you're not really aware of their thoughts, their feelings, their rights. It's just
Their needs.
They exist as they relate to you. Like all roads lead back to you, which is why a toddler can take a ball just because they want to play with it. And when the other toddler's upset, they're like, what is your problem?
Well, and it's not stealing per se because you cannot cognitively comprehend that the other person exists and that they own the thing that you're taking.
Right.
So I want it, I take it, I'm hungry, I eat it. This is known as the impulsive stage for very valid reasons.
Next is the second person perspective. This perspective is all about relating to others. Another way of putting this is that we understand who we are by way of our relationships. We see that other people have feelings and desires just like we do, and that they matter. So we move from I, me, mine, to you and me become we, and we both have thoughts, feelings, needs, and experiences that are different. And I think this is when we start to establish friendships. You know, if you go down to like children, they go from just me and what I want as toddlers and infants to relating to other children and starting to establish rules of engagement, right?
Yeah.
Because your needs matter, my needs matter. And this is where, like, you see kids creating games and they start arguing over rules. The rules are to make sure that everyone is taken care of, right? That everyone's needs and wants matter.
Well, and in the beginning stages, it looks like a toddler or a little bit older learning how to share. But that continues to develop into adulthood, right? And I think of my own experiences. And while cognitively, I knew that other people had feelings and perspectives and values different than my own, it wasn't until the beginning of developing that personalities course that I was like, I had this light bulb moment of like, oh, I value efficiency. When I'm interacting with someone, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible.
Right.
The majority of the people I'm interacting with, particularly women, that isn't their focus.
Well, and I should say that when you value efficiency, that's also your way of honoring the other person, honoring their time. Let's make sure, like, I'm sure you've got things to do. Like,
right.
It's not just about you. It's very others focused.
So this goes back to the spiral concept of like, yes, as a young child, I learned how to share. And I included other people in my paradigm and considering them throughout decades of life. But I didn't fully implement and grasp that concept until I did my own learning of personalities. And I was like, oh, this is how we relate to each other.
Yeah.
And this is how we relate to each other differently. And because I am more task and logic oriented, I needed a construct and a framework to put it in because it wasn't a strength that I had naturally.
Right.
It wasn't something I understood just by observing. So third person perspective is next, and it is synonymous with objectivity. We are less susceptible at this stage to individual impulses, tribal, cultural, or community influences. We stand back and observe in a more detached way. We are to some extent detached from second person perspective of shared group meaning. So we start asking questions along the lines of, is what I've always believed really true? We previously took belief and knowledge of authority figures in our life and applied it as truth to our life as truth, or right or wrong. At this perspective, a new burden of proof is needed, and in this stage, we become our own authority. We see ourselves and others as autonomous beings with the choice to safely pursue individual ideals without abandonment or rejection. To sum it up in a single sentence, I consciously choose to become the author of my own life.
And the fourth perspective is, what if we approach life and people with the energy of, tell me what it's like to be you?
So not only am I not projecting my values onto you and telling you what's right and wrong from an individual perspective, Or even a group perspective. I'm saying, oh, I know who I am and what my identity is. You have a complete separate identity and vastly different experience. I am curious and I want to know what it's like to be you.
Well, and a lot of people don't reach this stage, which is one of the reasons why there's so much conflict globally, all the way down to our homes.
Yeah.
Is we just kind of get stuck in our own perspectives.
Yeah.
And having this
And in our identities.
And in our identities, having the strength to say, I know who I am, but I'm curious. Like the whole Ted Lasso thing, be curious and not judgmental. Mm-hmm. And I'm not looking to correct, and I'm not looking to refute. I genuinely just want to understand. And I am open to even shifting within myself as I gain new information and perspectives is a very healthy, dynamic place to be in. It's also how we build bridges and heal divides.
And it's so important to point out that you can't get to that stage without the previous stages.
Yeah.
But if we choose to stay in a previous stage, we also can't get to the fourth, right? And that's why each stage is so important in the development.
And in the fifth person perspective, we become construct aware. In other words, we are aware of the constructed nature of all knowledge now. We are witnessing and experiencing the inner workings of the meaning-making process itself. This is where you ask the question, what is truth, right? This is where you ask the question of not just what are my values and beliefs, but what is the very nature of reality? And I think these last two leave us so open to learning from each other and making room for each other and not needing to impose on one another.
Okay, sixth-person perspective is really interesting. This is where we learn to be confident in our constructs. This is when we consciously choose constructs that are supportive. And it is also called a unitive reality, meaning we interact with ourselves and the world in a unifying way. And while there's aspects of unity in previous stages, this is where it takes central stage.
Well, look at this. We were talking about in the previous stage, okay, I want to learn from you, I want to understand you, I want to respect you, I want to make room for you. But that still implies a you're over there, I'm over here, we're each doing our own thing. And in the unity stage, it's like we bring it all together so that we can work together to create something even more. And we retain our individuality, we retain our differences, but we also join over our commonalities.
Right. You can see as you go through these stages, at each stage, the sum of the whole is greater than the parts, and that momentum keeps building.
Right.
And we're at a point where it comes together in a supportive, unifying way.
Shazam! So we've got several more videos, 6 more to be precise, in this series. Our next one is going to be about that first person perspective, all about being in tune with who you are and what you want. And so we're going to see you there because this is going to help you, all of us, so very much. Until next time, keep shining.
We need your light.